The downpour was relentless, a curtain of water that seemed to have no end. The sky was a deep, inky black, punctuated only by the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the landscape in stark, brief moments. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, a constant reminder of the storm's fury. Rain lashed against Luke's raincoat, each drop feeling like a tiny hammer striking his body. His hood was pulled tight over his head, but it did little to keep the water from seeping in. The streets were deserted, everyone else having sought refuge from the storm. The wind whipping at his face was fierce, almost as if it had a mind of its own, determined to push him back. Luke squinted against the onslaught, his eyes barely able to stay open. The combination of rain and wind made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. It was a night that made you want to be curled up indoors, safe and warm, with a blanket wrapped around you and a good book in hand. The kind of night where the sound of rain on the roof was a comforting lullaby, rather than a relentless assault. As Luke hurried towards his porch, he thought longingly of a hot cup of tea, the steam rising from the cup and warming his waist. He could almost feel the warmth of the fireplace, the crackling of the logs, a stark contrast to the cold, wet world outside. That's when he heard it, a faint whimpering, almost lost in the symphony of the storm. He paused, listening intently, straining to hear. The sound came again, a small, desperate plea. It was unmistakable now, a cry for help that cut through the noise of the storm. Luke's heart raced as he tried to pinpoint the direction it was coming from. Curiosity piqued. Luke followed the sound, his footsteps squelching on the sodden grass. Each step was an effort, the ground soft and slippery beneath his feet. He moved cautiously, not wanting to lose his footing in the treacherous conditions. The wind seemed to be directing him towards the far end of his garden, almost as if it were guiding him. He could feel the gusts pushing him forward, urging him to continue despite the elements. Where a sprawling rhododendron bush offered some shelter from the elements. The bush was dense, its thick leaves providing a small haven from the relentless rain. Luke crouched down, peering into the shadows, searching for the source of the cry. Crouching down, Luke peered into the heart of the bush. The leaves, heavy with rain, formed a curtain of green. The whimpering was louder now, closer. He gently pushed aside some branches, his heart pounding with a mixture of apprehension and concern. And there it was. Huddled in the damp earth, a tiny creature shivered. Its fur, matted with rain, seemed to be a dark brown, almost black. It looked like a small dog, thin and weak. Large, watery eyes stared up at Luke, filled with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. Compassion surged through Luke. He couldn't leave it there, exposed to the storm. Scooping up the creature gently, he cradled it close. It was lighter than he expected, its bones delicate beneath his touch. He hurried back inside, his clothes soaked through, but he barely noticed. Inside, he grabbed an old towel, drying the creature as best he could. It let out soft whimpers, its body trembling. Luke warmed some milk, pouring it into a small saucer. He offered it to the creature, hoping it would eat. To his relief, it lapped up the milk, its tiny pink tongue darting out. As the days passed, the creature grew stronger. It ate ravenously, devouring the food Luke provided. It was playful too, chasing after rolled-up socks and batting at dangling tontetes. But as Luke observed it more closely, doubts began to creep in. It didn't look quite like any puppy he'd seen before. Its legs seemed too long, its body too lean, and its head. There was something unusual about the shape of its head, the set of its eyes. It was more elongated, almost feline. And its mezzo. It wasn't a bark, not really. It was more of a high-pitched giggle, almost hysterical. Worried, Luke decided to take the creature to the vet. He explained that he'd found it abandoned in the storm, unsure of its breed. The vet, a kind woman with a gentle touch, examined the animal carefully. She listened to its heart, checked its teeth. But her brow furrowed. a look of puzzlement on her face. She admitted she'd never seen anything quite like it. The creature's behavior wasn't helping either. It shied away from the vet's touch, emitting those unsettling giggles that seemed more like manic laughter. The mystery deepens online. Frustrated, Luke returned home, no closer to understanding what exactly he had rescued. He decided to turn to the internet, hoping someone online might have encountered something similar. He took several pictures of the creature, its unusual gait, its pointed ears, its almost sly grin. He posted them on a forum dedicated to identifying unknown animals, detailing his experience. The response was almost immediate. People were intrigued. Some suggested it might be a rare breed of dog. Others ventured guesses about exotic canines, but no one could say for sure. Revelation at the clinic. Then came a message that changed everything. A wildlife biologist, having seen Luke's post, reached out. He was certain, based on the creature's features and behavior, that it wasn't a dog at all. He believed it was a striped hyena, a species native to Africa. Luke was astonished. A hyena? In his backyard? He contacted the biologist immediately, arranging a meeting at a specialized animal clinic. The biologist's suspicions were confirmed. The creature, still small and playful, was indeed a young striped hyena, likely separated from its pack during a transfer. Farewell, little friend. A bittersweet feeling washed over Luke as he stood by the window, gazing out at the world beyond. The memories of the past few months played like a film reel in his mind, each moment more vivid than the last. He had grown attached to the creature, this unexpected guest who had stumbled into his life on a stormy night. The night was dark and the rain was relentless, but the small, shivering hyena at his doorstep had brought a strange sense of warmth and purpose to his life. Over the weeks, Luke had cared for it, played with it, and in its own way, it had brought him immense joy. The hyena's playful antics and curious nature had filled his home with laughter and life. He remembered the first time it had cautiously approached him, the trust slowly building between them. But he knew he couldn't keep it. The realization had dawned on him gradually, each day a reminder that the hyena was not meant to live in a human home. It needed the wild, the freedom to roam and be with its own kind. It belonged in its natural habitat, not confined to his home. Luke had spent hours researching, looking at photos and videos of hyenas in the wild, understanding their behaviors and needs. He knew that keeping it would be selfish, and that true love sometimes meant letting go. Arrangements were made to transfer the hyena to a wildlife sanctuary, a place where it could thrive in the company of its own kind. The farewell was emotional. Luke had prepared for this moment, but nothing could have truly readied him for the heartache of saying goodbye. Luke watched as the hyena, now larger and more energetic, was loaded into a transport crate. The sanctuary staff were gentle and reassuring, but the weight of the moment was heavy. He could see the confusion in the hyena's eyes, and it broke his heart. It looked back at him, and for a moment, their eyes met. In that brief exchange, Luke felt a deep connection, a silent understanding that transcended words. The hyena seemed to say goodbye in its own way, a final look that Luke would carry with him forever. As the transport vehicle drove away, Luke stood by the window, feeling a mix of sorrow and relief. He knew he had done the right thing, but the emptiness in his home was palpable. He imagined the hyena running free, living the life it was meant to live, and that thought brought him a small measure of peace. Luke looked at a photo of the hyena, smiling through his tears. The memories they had created together would always be a part of him. "Farewell, little friend," he whispered, knowing that their bond would never truly be broken. Reflections on an encounter. Life returned to normal, but things were different. The days seemed to blend together, yet there was an underlying current of change that Luke couldn't quite put his finger on. The city buzzed with its usual energy, parks were filled with laughter, and family dinners were as lively as ever. But for Luke, there was a subtle shift in his perception of the world around him. The empty space in Luke's home served as a constant reminder of the extraordinary encounter. It was as if the absence of the hyena had left a tangible void, a silent echo of the wild that had briefly touched his life. Every time he glanced at the empty chair or the vacant spot in the living room, he was transported back to those surreal moments. He often found himself thinking about the hyena, wondering how it was faring in its new home. The sanctuary had promised it would be well taken care of, but Luke couldn't help but feel a pang of concern. He would sit for hours, lost in thought, flipping through the photo album that documented their brief time together. He kept in touch with the sanctuary, receiving updates and photos. Each message brought a mix of relief and nostalgia. The photos showed the hyena adapting well, playing with other animals, and even forming bonds with the caretakers. These updates were a lifeline, a way for Luke to stay connected to the creature that had so profoundly impacted his life. The experience had changed him. It had opened his eyes to the beauty and unpredictability of life. He began to journal his thoughts, capturing the lessons he had learned and the emotions he had felt. Meditation became a daily practice, a way to process the profound shift in his perspective. It had taught him about the unexpected turns life could take, the way a single moment could alter the course of one's existence. He realized that life was a winding road, full of sudden changes and unforeseen events. This newfound understanding brought a sense of peace and acceptance about the bonds that could form between humans and animals, bonds that transcended the boundaries of species and circumstance. He found himself more attuned to the animals around him, whether it was petting a dog, feeding birds, or watching a zookeeper interact with the creatures in their care. Even under the most unusual circumstances, these interactions, no matter how brief or unexpected, held a deeper significance. They were reminders of the interconnectedness of all living beings and the empathy that could bridge even the widest of gaps. It was a memory he knew he would cherish forever, a chapter in his life that had brought a new dimension to his understanding of the world. He often shared the story with friends, each retelling bringing a smile to his face and a sense of gratitude for the experience. A stormy night's tale that had brought a touch of the wild into his life. The memory of that night, with its howling winds and flashing lightning, was etched into his mind. It was a reminder of the wild, unpredictable beauty of life and the extraordinary encounters that could happen when least expected.